Operation Neptune, planned and commanded by Admiral Sir Bertrand Ramsay, seen here boarding the assault headquarters ship HMS Logs at Portsmouth in June of 1944, was the aptly named title given to the naval operations within the overall plan for the Allied invasion of Normandy. Under the supreme command of General Dwight D. Eisenhower, this was codenamed Overlord. But it is with Neptune this latest Royal Navy video episode is principally concerned, and, following the usual format, I will again relegate my narration to that of only a secondary role, preferring to put a greater emphasis on the importance of presenting archive film in as true life context as possible. Thus, the narrative will serve purely as a complementary guide, taking note that in-depth studies of Operation Neptune already abound in book form. And what we are initially seeing are some of the many craft in and around the Solent just prior to embarking upon their historical journey. Berthing alongside Logs, this RML carried no less a personage than Winston Churchill and Cabinet Minister Ernest Bevin. Both were keenly aware of all this activity taking place on the Solent and obviously wanted to make their own personal observations. Indeed, Churchill had even tried to book himself a D-Day passage on the cruiser Belfast until being firmly dissuaded by the Supreme Allied Commander. Certainly, Neptune was the greatest amphibious operation in world history and was an unsurpassed masterpiece of planning involving more than 6,000 ships of all description. And it would be naive indeed to imagine that every one was captured on camera. But I have endeavored to feature in this program most of the surviving archive film where ships are seen, as for example one of the assigned bombarding cruisers, HMS Sirius, seen here arriving on the Solent having departed the Clyde on June 3rd. She did survive the war and was broken up at Blythe in 1956. Hardy veterans of Russian convoys are these O-class destroyers seen leaving their Solent anchorage. With the officer second in line, the flotilla leader Onslow leads the van as they departed for their D-Day operational station, which would be on the western flank of the task force. Third in line is GO4, HMS Onslaught. And finally comes the Oribe, G66. Typically, and with no measure of sentiment, all four would be sold to foreign navies shortly after the war, as the RN was rapidly being diminished in strength. General Eisenhower, seen here with Admiral Ramsay, had provisionally fixed D-Day for June 5th, but due to atrocious weather conditions, it was postponed for 24 hours, a very difficult decision, not least as the assault forces had already embarked from many ports situated throughout the south coast. From the larger of these, they were able to board their ships directly by gangway, whereas from other locations, such as Brixham, Salcombe, Dartmouth, Poole, etc., troops had to be ferried out to waiting offshore transports via drifters and LCVPs, and boarding ship was then accomplished by means of side nets. They would then sail to their designated convoy assembly areas, being situated just south of the Isle of Wight. Thus, a reversal of this complex operation would have been fraught with difficulties. Not all assault forces sailed via large transports, for many would make the journey by LCILs. Each carried some 200 fully equipped troops, and in spite of their small size, they were quite seaworthy. Tanks went via LSTs, being just another variation of the complex array of landing craft, which were so essential to the success of Operation Neptune. Some conventional ships were even allocated a new functional role, as in the case here with the old cruiser Dispatch. She would serve purely as a headquarters base ship off Gold Beach, while her sister ship, HMS Durban, was ignominiously detailed off to that of a sunken block ship. But here, just before sailing, we find the captain of the Dispatch addressing her ship's company.
I'm very glad that we've been able to get practically everybody we wanted from the fleet. You are representing the Royal Navy. That is to say that you are sailors, first, foremost, and throughout. Thank you very much.
Come on, sir! Double on!
Fellas, open up! Take them off!
Like myself, I suspect the cameraman was intrigued to see the lieutenant wearing a bow tie and uniform, and probably also thinking, what a fascinating mode of dress in which to go to war, as the Dispatch got underway to the strains of a solo piper.
We haven't got double the armament. We'll have to filter the FIDF's weapons.
But they're going to need everything they have. What kind of weapons training have those naval hydrographers had?
Excuse me, sir.
Just as her sailing hour approached, the headquarters ship logs would receive on board a last-minute transfer of senior personnel via this approaching MTB.
Good luck. Thank you very much.
We try and do a good job for you, and the very best of luck.
The in-view gunboat HMS Locust was one of some 18 vessels allocated a similar role to HMS Logs, whose greatly enlarged communications center is here clearly defined. And being an ex-telegraphist myself, I do find it quite nostalgic to see again these B-28 receivers, along with all the coding and teleprinter equipment.
Now these are the bunch here.
This is your commanding officer speaking. Following changes of orders. On or about 1,400 hours today, this ship will...
As the senior Army officer on board Logs announced that operations were finally about to commence, similar events were taking place aboard many other ships that day.
The end of an era to the defense of these islands. Yes, the Navy has taken some hard knocks in recent years, in which many of you fought. The Royal Navy did its job with credit. We demonstrated yet again the flexibility and effectiveness of sea power to meet the unexpected. There are plenty of challenges, difficulties, and problems ahead. We must remain as operationally ready and effective as before. And that is going to be up to all of you. Thank you all very much.
Arriving from their many points of departure, the great mass of the invasion force would rendezvous just south of the Isle of Wight, where, forming into various assigned groups. Each would then enter one of the many channel lanes being swept ahead of them by no less than the 11 minesweeping flotillas. Certainly the complexity of the problem was enormous, for this vast array of various craft all had to ultimately arrive virtually at the same place and time in almost total darkness. And it speaks volumes for the challenge Admiral Ramsay had to face in perfecting the overall planning of Operation Neptune, which, there can be little doubt, will remain the greatest amphibious operation of all time. And we will now follow some scenes of that great armada as were captured on film by Royal Navy cine camera units.
it's Fernie of the 21st Flotilla.
As we observe these large, specially built troop transports, it is a sobering thought to realize that for many of the onboard personnel, this would undoubtedly be the last full day of their lives. We are now on board the cruiser Scylla, flagship of the Eastern Task Force Commander Admiral Philip Vian, looking somewhat disdainfully towards the camera. Sadly, it would prove to be her last assignment after striking a mine off Juno Beach, and Admiral Vian would transfer his flag to the headquarters ship Hillary. Meanwhile, we will share these following scenes taken from her decks as she makes her way towards the ETF area. Rapidly coming up astern is the destroyer Boadicea, and exactly 1 week after D-Day she was attacked by aircraft and sank within just 3 short minutes. There were only 12 survivors, while 9 officers and 161 ratings would be lost. As dusk began to approach and the great armada drew ever closer to its fateful destination, it must forever be a matter of wonder that this huge invasion force has still remained undetected, even more especially so in view of the weather-aborted start of the previous day. But undetected it did remain almost until the very last moment of touchdown. By early dawn, the assault convoys anchored in their lowering position some 7 miles offshore, and as they awaited the fatal approach of H-hour, a naval task force would sail close inshore and commence a heavy bombardment. But, slightly out of time sequence, we will shortly see the midget submarine X-23 closing HMS Logs, being one of 2 that had provided beacon navigation lights to aid the assault forces.
We got him.
Hold on, Churchill. You just those two together up there, okay?
Yeah. Really good achievement, actually.
So you've done a good job, sir.
Unto Almighty God, blessed be the name of the Lord.
Right, lower. Good. Get on with it.
One up! Slash the boat, get to the boat then. Come on, go ahead.
Never said go yet! Do what he does, then get away.
Leave that to me.
Coming aboard!
Okay, Coxswain.
Well, I hope this weather holds.
Away all boats. Away all boats away.
Okay, you guys, let's go. Come on.
All crew, clear the starboard side.
Ready on the 35, folks!
Away all boats away.
Well, this one's not going to finish in 5 minutes.
Away you go, lad.
is London. London calling in the home, overseas and European services of the BBC and through United Nations Radio Mediterranean. And this is John Snagg speaking. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, have just issued communique number 1, and in a few seconds I will read it to you. Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France. I'll repeat that communique. Communique number 1.
Shoot!
240 degrees. Everything's easy. Everybody, up and up. Keep your heads up.
Stay together! Hurry up!
Before D-Day finally drew to a close, almost 133,000 Allied troops would have been landed, plus thousands of vehicles. But as this program was devised solely on the various aspects of Operation Neptune, we will now leave the dramatic initial beach landing scenes to feature some of the many warships which took part in the bombardment, such as the in-view Rodney, to be followed by views of the Erebus, Frobisher, and the distant Mauritius. Offering an awe-inspiring sight to the fleet are these overhead views of the legendary 6th Airborne Division on their way to consolidate the flanks of the Eastern Assault Forces and the capture of the famous renamed Pegasus Bridge. Seen in the background is the cruiser Diadem from the decks of HMS Belfast, from where these few other sequences were also filmed. And sailing on her last wartime operation is the grand old lady, HMS Warspite, as we now are about to see further views of the Frobisher, Mauritius, plus the Glasgow and Ajax, and again Rodney, just before the big shoot.
Stand for action.
Here more landing craft are seen heading towards the beach, and by making use of onboard camera shots, a higher sense of drama immediately becomes apparent. This destroyer providing close inshore support is the Virgo, and it is interesting to note that every bombarding ship carried a Royal Artillery officer trained in combined operations. Frequently, he would liaise with a counterpart who, in company with a small party of naval telegraphists, were situated on shore in very dangerous forward positions, and not a draft chit to be envied, I'm sure. As the crew of HMS Faulkner cheered on the big guns of Warspite, we briefly see some of the damage the bombardment had caused to enemy coastal defenses. And after the beachheads became firmly consolidated as the land battles moved further inshore, supplies and equipment were then able to be landed at a more orderly pace. Initially, and before any Army field hospitals could be established, quick evacuation of wounded personnel to wait in offshore hospital carriers was quite essential. 5 of these ships were allocated to East Task Force area, and within the terms of international law, they were able to sail independently without any form of escort. Provision had to be made in the care of German prisoners, and in the early stages, before any holding compounds had been prepared, they were hastily taken off the beachheads by means of these large rhino barges to wait in LSTs. Within just 2 or 3 days of the initial assault landings, and to provide a breakwater shelter for many small craft, a series of old and damaged ships were sunk off each of the 5 beachheads. Some of these were in fact warships, like this 20-year-old Dutch cruiser Sumatra, and of interest, immediately just ahead of her would eventually lie the British cruiser Durban. Some 80 such vessels would be consigned to this ignominious fate, including the in-view French battleship Corbeil and the auxiliary anti-aircraft ship Allenbank. Far more complex were the ingeniously constructed Mulberry Harbors. Designed to rise and fall with the tide, they afforded discharge facilities for deep-laden ships of large tonnage some distance offshore. As was apparent, the Mulberries were principally used for the discharge of vehicles and tanks and guns, of course. Ships would then proceed closer inshore to the sheltered anchorages, where other supplies were offloaded onto small amphibious craft operated by Army personnel. Moored in the background is the mine-damaged destroyer Glaisdale, about to be towed to Immingham by the tug Freedom. And it is with this latter type vessel we will now feature a small tribute for their sterling work in Operation Neptune. Considering over 160 tugs were deployed, one could almost devote an entire program of their story. But of course, that is far beyond the brief of this particular episode. However, what is about to follow are a few short extracts of a typically mundane, unescorted towing assignment by this unidentified civilian manned tug. Of the many books written on Operation Neptune, it is doubtful one would ever find a reference heading concerning bread meat and spuds. But certainly captured on film is this amusing, light-hearted routine of a drifter supplying warships off the beachheads in need of such supplies. Just hoist the appropriate pennant, and we will serve your needs. On June 19th, a great storm erupted which caused havoc to the Mulberry Harbors and block ships. But some miles off Gold Beach, even more drama was taking place, for the destroyer Fury had struck a mine and lay helpless, wallowing in heavy seas. With some of her crew in urgent need of medical attention, the destroyer Scorpion faced the difficult challenge of rendering assistance by her ship's doctor, while no doubt her seaboat's crew were already casting anxious glances upon those dark, foreboding, restless seas.
Stand by to close reef. Move yourself. Ready up. Ready up. Get off the line and then we'll take it from there. Look sharp. Slip away. Slip. Very straight. This way. Got it? Find something to grab hold of.
By the time the storm finally abated, considerable damage had been done. Unloading of supplies had been completely disrupted, and crews could only struggle to save their ships as they dragged their anchors all over the place. However, one ship was not so lucky, for the poor little Fury had been driven onto the shoreline. She was eventually salved and towed back to the UK, where almost immediately she was assigned to the breaker's yard, and sadly, her fine wartime career would be finally over. The storm also caused hundreds of small craft to be washed ashore, and the whole assault area was strewn with a vast flotsam of wreckage. But the most serious damage was that caused to both Mulberry Harbors, with one being so badly wrecked its repair was never attempted. It would take 1 month before all the supply deficiencies it created were eventually made good. As we observe the destroyer Cotswold close inshore, the beachhead would appear relatively quiet as Admiral Vian took the opportunity to inspect the general area. However, there was another person anxious to be there, and, more especially, to visit his troops. This being, of course, the King, and he accomplished this mission in company with Admiral Cunningham and Air Marshal Portal when boarding the cruiser Arethusa at Portsmouth early on the morning of June 16th.
Going west today. Yeah, there isn't very much of a change on this. I don't think it's going to go down much as we hope.
Arriving off Sword Beach at midday, Arethusa would depart just 5 hours later, so no time was wasted in transferring the King to an awaiting ML.
The great crusade set forth.
To land the King directly onto the beach, a further transfer was necessary to this Army amphibious craft, and on arrival, General Montgomery would be found waiting to greet his Commander-in-Chief. Two of the British cruisers assigned to the Western Task Force were the In-View Glasgow and the shorter-to-be-seen Enterprise. They were known as chummy ships, being they had both continually operated together for some previous months, and on June 25th, they would become part of an Anglo-American task force called upon to bombard the large German gun emplacements surrounding the port of Cherbourg. Thus, in company with the American battleship Nevada and the cruisers Quincy, Augusta, and Tuscaloosa, plus 6 destroyers, here viewed from the decks of HMS Enterprise, is a surviving film record of that event as they sailed from Portland during the early dawn hours.
Steer 175. Starboard 10, steer 175, sir.
We've been ordered to proceed to Cherbourg in a roundabout trip. Don't Coxswain, stand by. Aye, aye, sir.
Quite noticeable are the serene, calm waters, being just after the big storm which destroyed one of the Mulberry harbors. This accelerated the need to capture the port of Cherbourg, which indirectly led to this preliminary operation. In the distance, one will later see the 9th Minesweeping Flotilla being shelled by shore batteries, though the surviving footage is very brief. HMS Sidmouth received a near hit and as some Fairmile gunboats laid a protective white smokescreen, they were ordered to sail smartly out of gun range. You will also observe the Glasgow taking hits amidships and later land her casualties.
Ship coming up.
Not too jerky. Keep it nice and smooth.
Easy, you'll be all right.
Yeah. What do you think, lads?
Seen departing the Solent at 0830 hours on the morning of June 12th is the destroyer Kelvin, bound for Juno Beach. And, by coincidence, she was about to pass a flotilla of Bangor-class minesweepers, which took part in the just previously seen Cherbourg operation. The camera ship is the destroyer Scourge, and what is so unusual about this particular section of archive footage is to find such long sustained views of just one ship. Only later did I learn the reason. Winston Churchill was on board. And as he finally got his cherished wish to visit the beachhead, it also afforded us some marvelous views of the beautiful classic lines of a World War II British destroyer in full flight. And whereas working examples of vintage aircraft and their ilk still exist, of course, stirring sights like this have now sadly passed forever into history. Kelvin arrived off Juno Beach at 1200 hours, and as she proceeds to her anchorage, we will see in the background the cruiser Scylla. She would strike a mine in the area just 11 days later. Towed by tugs to the Solent and thence Sheerness, she lay forlorn at the jetty for a very long period, until finally, still unrepaired, and yet also still a very young ship, poor Scylla was taken from Garlock to the breakers in 1950. But here, a launch makes fast to the Kelvin to take her distinguished visitor ashore. Churchill's visit was quite brief, and before Kelvin left the area, she would take him on a short detour to see some of the ships of the ETF, and those he had captured on film include the Rodney, Ramillies, and Ajax. Yet within just 5 short years, all these ships, including the Kelvin herself, would have been dispassionately discarded to the breakers, as our National Heritage Committee conveniently turned a blind eye to any form of historical warship preservation. But that is another story. While our picture story of Operation Neptune is now rapidly coming to a close, as did sadly the life of its chief architect, Admiral Ramsay, who was killed in an air crash just 7 months after D-Day. Certainly as Churchill ended his visit to the beachhead, he was more than pleased that the success of the operation now seemed assured, and to show his contempt for the enemy, he insisted Kelvin, before she turned her bows homeward, sail close inshore and fire a parting shot towards them, while no doubt he also contentedly clapped that proverbial cigar in his jaws, as the captain then ordered, "Full ahead both." An end of story.